Available to you during this meeting. So links and any documents or slide decks will be provided at the end of the webinar. We will post them on our website, and of course, the recording will and transcription will be available. And if you need to put this in the chat as well. So I think somebody has already turned on live transcriptions, but you can go to the bottom of your screen and hit the button furthest to the right that says live transcriptions or CC. And there will be a small menu that will appear and it'll show subtitles. The second is a full transcript, and the third will take you to the subtitle settings. The full transcript will allow you to look back at what has been said. The settings will allow you to set default settings. To make the screen a full screen or zoom in, you can scroll your mouse at the top of the screen and you will see a button that will appear titled View Options. When you click, a drop down will appear, and by hovering over the only option, another drop down will allow you to make the full screen to zoom 50, 100, 200, or 300%. All right. So thank you for that. And again, my name is, or maybe I didn't say it yet, my name is Twyla. I'm the Director of Outreach at the Colorado Department of Higher Ed. And today we have Sophie. She'll be giving us an update on CASFA, everything CASFA. And then Jennifer, she will first jump right in and give us she's our outreach navigator, and she will give us some FAFSA updates. So go ahead, Jen, take it over.
Thank you, Twyla, and thanks everyone for joining us. Happy New Year. We appreciate you being here for the first Lunch and Learn of 2026. I will share some FAFSA updates with you, just a few of them. Let me share my screen. Oops. All right. And these FAFSA updates are in response to the Public Law 119-21 being passed last July 2025 and is coming to fruition this July 2026. So starting in July, the foreign earned income will be added to the annual gross income. Also, the Pell Grant calculation is modified. And so that means any student with an SAI equal to or greater than the maximum Pell Grant amount, they will not be eligible for any Pell Grant. Another change coming this summer is that the total amount parents take in Direct Plus loans, they cannot exceed $20,000 in those loans per student per academic year. And then once they've borrowed up to 65,000, they cannot borrow any more Direct Plus loans for those students, even if those loans have been repaid, forgiven, canceled, or discharged. Also coming up this summer is the Workforce Pell Grant Program. So that expands Pell Grant eligibility to students who are currently enrolled or going to enroll in career training programs. The program must meet this criteria, and there's a few things there that they have to do, but the student must be sure that if they are going to apply for this Workforce Pell Grant, that their program meets all of these specifications. There have also been some changes to professional judgments. Institutes of higher education are they no longer have the option of denying all requests for a professional judgment. In fact, they must have a policy and process in place for reviewing professional judgments, and they no longer can choose not to perform professional judgment adjustments. Professional judgments might be considered if the student has a special or unusual circumstance. And if the student does have a special circumstance or an unusual circumstance that was not recorded on their FAFSA application, then they would want to contact the financial aid office at their the schools that they're considering and explain to them that one, either they have a special circumstance, maybe something like a loss of income. In 2024, they had that income. In 2025, they do not have that income. The financial aid office can make adjustments either to the cost of attendance or the elements of the student's SAI calculation so that either their cost of attendance comes down or their financial aid eligibility uh, increases. And then the same with an unusual circumstance. However, if a student has an unusual circumstance, this is a circumstance that is going to change their dependency status. If they are 24 or under, chances are they may need a contributor on their FAFSA form unless they meet or have one of these unusual circumstances. And then they would have independent status so that they do not need a parent or a contributor to complete their FAFSA. The professional judgment process, though, pretty much does stay the same. There are three main steps. The student and family requests the professional judgment from the financial aid office and provides the documentation that they ask for. Step two, the financial aid office would then review that documentation and the request. The office may have requests for additional documentation. They may have additional questions for the student or family. And then once they review all of that information, they will then deny or approve that request. And if they approve that request, again, it's going to either adjust the student's cost of attendance or the elements within their SAI calculation so that it changes their financial aid eligibility. Either way, that information is documented in the student's file. So those are a few of the changes coming up this summer. So if you are helping students, please and families fill out the FAFSA, please be sure they're aware of those changes. Our next Lunch and Learn will be February 11th. If you'd like to register for that, you can use this QR code. And don't forget, we also have our event request form. So if you are in need of a training or presentation, perhaps you're having an event and need with application assistance, you can send us that request form through this QR code. We do try very hard to accommodate all requests. If you just kind of have a general question, need some information or maybe resources, you can reach out to either the FAFSA or outreach inbox and we will reply to you. As always, we have resources, many FAFSA and CASFA resources on our website, and that's it at the bottom there. But thank you again for joining us today on your lunch hour. We greatly appreciate it. And Twyla, I will hand it back to you.
Great, thanks, Jen. I am going to put a quick link into the chat. So the department, some of you may know, the department has a financial aid completion tool, and there is the link there. You can click on it, and we now have only FAFSA data for the 26-27 application year in there. We are working on adding the CASFA data into this tool, which it'll just be, financial aid completion numbers that are in here. We're not going to be separating out FAFSA and CASFA, but it will only be for the 26-27 year that will have both numbers. And then we do have 25-26 and 24-25 FAFSA numbers in the tool. This tool, we recently had, we lost some funding during the 2025 legislative session. So all data share agreements that school districts had in place expired December 31st, 2025. So no longer, you can just see what you see now. Nobody has access to log on to accounts or anything. We are working on, we understand that this tool is, very important. So we are working on securing funding for the future. So again, district level completion data will remain publicly available on the main landing page. All right, that's what I had for that. And I will send it over to Sophie, and she's going to dive into FAFSA CAFSA. So take it over, Sophie.
Thank you so much, Twyla. Hi everyone, I'm Sophie Vogel. I'm the CASFA coordinator. I am going to be talking about CASFA today. I am looking forward to this conversation. And as my colleagues and I were discussing, sometimes when I talk about CASFA, I go pretty quickly because I have a lot of information to cover. So I'm going to do my very best to go at a reasonable rate and then also, of course, answer questions at the end of the session. Um, Let's see. I want to talk about for the agenda, we're going to talk about what is the CASFA, who completes it. Then I'll be showing screenshots and doing a walkthrough of the actual application and then answering some questions. Before talking about the CASFA, I am going to talk about financial aid because dependency for the FAFSA and the CASFA are the same. So this is whether, if you're working with high school students, whether the high school student needs to, or excuse me, whether the student needs to include their parent contributor information. Oftentimes, high school students are dependent students, but here's some more information about who are dependent students, students born on or after January 1st, 2003, and independent students. No parent contributor information is required for those students. And then, of course, students are also considered independent if they were unaccompanied and homeless or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless. One other important piece to talk about when we talk about financial aid is who is my contributor? So contributors are, it's a language that federal student aid is using. So of course the CASFA is using that language as well. If a high school student is a dependent student, they're going to need their contributor, their parent contributor, to provide information on their FAFSA or their CASFA. Contributors who are married and they file taxes jointly, they only have to provide one taxpayer record. For contributors who are married filing separately, both contributors have to provide taxpayer records because those taxpayer records are independent. For divorced parents, the parent who contributed the most financially in the last 12 months is the contributor. If it's equal, if the parents split 50-50, then it's the parent with the greatest income and assets who is the contributor. And then if that is equal, the parents choose. And another just quick reminder, SAI is Student Aid Index. That is the number that the student gets after they complete a FAFSA or CASFA, and it replaces EFC, which is Expected Family Contribution, which was from the FAFSA a few years ago. So moving on, here is some information about the CASFA. CASFA is an acronym. It stands for the Colorado Application for State Financial Aid. So CASFA is for students who are not eligible for federal student aid, undocumented students, or students from mixed status families or other situations who prefer not to share their contributors' personal data beyond Colorado higher education institutions. Students who complete a CASFA are applying for state and institutional aid only and not federal student aid. So, of course, I will go over that again in depth, but this information helps us understand what is the CASFA. In addition, this QR code will take you to the CASFA website. So, want to go over eligibility because I know it's confusing. So, students who qualify for federal student aid, right? Students who are completing a FAFSA, that includes U.S. citizens and eligible non-citizens. If you don't know what eligible non-citizens are, you can use the QR code or the link to go to Federal Student Aid's website where they explain exactly who are eligible non-citizens. So the definition, I screenshotted it. It's here on this slide. If you are an eligible non-citizen, if you are a U.S. national or a U.S. permanent resident, you're also an eligible non-citizen if you are a refugee or you have asylum granted, and a couple of other specific immigration statuses. So there are a few more as well, but this is the majority of the information. So students who use the CASFA agree with these statements. So first of all, they say, I am not a citizen or a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. And again, all of the eligible non-citizens were listed on the prior slide. Students are going to say, I qualify as a Colorado asset student because I have attended a Colorado high school for at least 1 year immediately before graduation or completed a high school equivalency examination in Colorado. And I have continuous and physical presence in Colorado for 12 months before the start of the semester. So students who use the CASFA should complete a CASFA if they have financial need, regardless of their Colorado asset eligibility. And then students who use the CASFA are going to be students who have DACA, which is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, that's an immigration status, or TPS, which is Temporary Protected Status, that is also an immigration status. Students who use the CAFSA agree with these statements, and this is where it gets confusing, and this is new from 2025. Students will say, I am eligible for federal student aid, but am from a mixed immigration status family or other situation, and I prefer not to share my contributor's personal data beyond Colorado higher education institutions. So now I'm going to go into more details about what that means. So this is the CASFA eligibility expansion, which means students from mixed immigration status families or other situations may want to know about this CASFA eligibility expansion. So these are federal student aid eligible students with undocumented parent contributors, for example. That could be some of the students who would benefit from the CASFA eligibility expansion. So, 3 points that I really want to make sure everyone understands if they are considering or if a family is considering taking advantage of the CASFA eligibility expansion. So, if a student qualifies for federal student aid, right, if they are a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen, if they have concerns about submitting a FAFSA, they need to revise 3 really important points. So, if the parent or spouse contributor, who could potentially be an undocumented parent or spouse contributor, ever applied for or used an I-10, and that's individual taxpayer identification number, those contributors already provided their information to the federal government. So completing a FAFSA or not completing a FAFSA wouldn't give any new information because that information is already out there. Same for if the parent or spouse contributor completed a FAFSA for an older sibling. They already shared their information with the federal government. So again, there would be no reason not to. And then I want to make sure everyone understands if a student qualifies for federal student aid, but they choose not to complete a FAFSA, they are going to forfeit up to $7,395 of Pell Grant. So just pointing out, many students will not be able to afford post-secondary education without a Pell Grant. I'm pointing this out to give very clear guidance that the number of students who will benefit from the CASFA eligibility expansion is probably a very small number, right? So if you work with students or you advise professionals who work with students, recognizing that this is not going to be hundreds of students, et cetera. It's going to be a very select group of students. A little more information about it. So how would I recommend you advise mixed immigration status families on filling out a financial aid application? I highly recommend you use President's Alliance for Higher Education and Immigration. They have a messaging template. I put here the link, and the QR code also takes you to the messaging template. I find it's very, very helpful. So the 5 things that they point out, and then they go into detail as well on their messaging template, is reassure students about their eligibility for federal student aid. So especially earlier in 2025, students maybe were asking, does the U.S. Department of Education exist? Is there still financial aid? Yes. Yes, there is financial aid. Yes, there are Pell Grants. 2, listen to and address security concerns. So it is not your position to minimize how someone is feeling or to reassure them that it's safe when in fact it may not be safe. So listening to and addressing their security concerns is extremely important. Number 3, respect privacy and avoid asking directly about immigration status. Please make sure if you're a professional and you're working with students, you understand how to properly create the environments where students feel comfortable telling you about their immigration status, and always avoid asking directly about it. Number 4, answer questions and consult experts. So in this case, some experts might be financial aid offices and or immigration attorneys are going to be the experts who are specifically prepared to answer these questions of should I complete a FAFSA or a CASFA. And then number 5 is talk through the pros and cons of the CASFA, right? Pros is that the information stays here in the state of Colorado. Con is that you the student can't be awarded a federal Pell Grant, which is up to $7,395. So, one important point that I want to highlight when having this, when providing this advice, is that the parent contributors are the family members who risk danger. Oh, sorry. I don't know what happened to my um, presentation, but that was my email. So let me get back to my presentation. The parent contributors are the ones who risk danger. I don't know what I say. Yeah, risk danger by sharing their information. So please make sure you include them in the conversation, right? This is not necessarily a decision that a student can make on their own. This is a family decision. The other point I want to make is that this is not, this would never be my decision. This is never going to be your decision. This is always going to be a family's decision. So you don't have the right answer. I don't have the right answer. All we can do is empower our families to have all of the information and for that they should make a decision for themselves based on the information. So again, reminding them that you're not going to tell them what to do. So moving on. For the 26-27 CASFA, that's the CASFA that students who are current high school students will be completing, the ones who are graduating in May for next year. Basically, students will create a CASFA account using a personal email address, and then parents need to wait until students invite them to do their part. They're going to be using their 2024 federal income taxes. I do recommend students get support, attending a FAFSA, CASFA, or financial aid night at their high school. And then the 26-27 CASFA opened October 1st. So the FAFSA and CASFA do need to, the law passed that says October 1st is the day that the FAFSA has to open. And so the CASFA will be opening then as well. One quick piece of information that I always want to talk about is college affordability messaging. So students need to complete one financial aid information application. They do not complete FAFSA and CASFA. They complete one or the other. So if any of your students don't want to pay full sticker price for college, they should apply for financial aid. Students who aren't income eligible for a federal Pell Grant could receive state or institutional aid. So I'm mentioning this because I've often had students say, oh yeah, my parents told me I'm not completing a financial aid application because I'm not going to get anything. And I think those students are misunderstanding how financial aid applications work. So I want to encourage, and actually the state of Colorado wants to encourage students to complete financial aid applications unless they want to pay the full price for college. And if they want to pay the full price for college, then they don't need to complete a financial aid application. So we have a new and improved CASFA. The 25-26 CASFA opened on September 8th, 2025, and then the 26-27, like I said, opened on October 1st. So we have a new software vendor, so there's some changes I want to go over with you. So the CASFA no longer has a field for student or contributor address or identification number. Let's see. The new CASFA does not require parent, spouse, or spouse contributors to create their own accounts. If the parent contributor is present when the student is completing their CASFA, the contributor can enter their information immediately after the student section is complete. So the workflow has it just roll directly from student to parent. If the contributor is not present, the student will enter the contributor email address and contributor will use the link they are emailed to access and complete the form. Married filing separately contributors, or I guess student or as well, will receive one invite and parent spouse will have to enter information consecutively. And then students and contributors can use the same email address. So these are all in response to challenges that we experienced with the prior CASFA vendor. So hopefully these new improvements will positively impact your students. So here is what the CASFA actually looks like. Here's the URL, and the QR code takes you to the URL. The applications are live, both for the current aid year, which is 25-26, and the future next aid year, which is 26-27. New students will start by creating an account. If they created an account in 2024, 25, or before, they will use the same email but need a new password. And then you can always search complete CASFA or CASFA login or go to that our state website and then click Start Application to get there. So if you go here and you click Create Account, your student is going to click Next. This information is hopefully helping everyone understand that students are creating accounts here and that parents should not be accessing the form this way. This is a confirmation of understanding. So a CASFA can be completed by any student applying only for Colorado state aid and institutional aid. The students who are eligible for federal aid may choose to complete a CASFA, but they will give up any federal aid. So I'm just trying to go over that again and again because it is confusing and new. And then Colorado does not require that students are undocumented to complete CASFA. So if they understand, they're going to click yes and next. Here's some multi-factor authentication. I think we're getting more familiar with this, but the student's going to create their account and they receive an email asking them to verify their email. They'll enter their login information and receive a verification code via email to complete the login process. And then there'll be a CASFA dashboard. So once the student logs in, they'll see the option to start a new application, paying close attention on if they want to complete a 25-26 or a 26-27 or both, but they have to do one at a time. For the CASFA student identity section, once the student starts the application, they'll be able to navigate between sections. As you can see on the left, it says student identity, personal information, personal circumstances, etc., etc. So they can use that menu, that left sidebar. And these sections and questions mirror the FAFSA because the CASFA uses the same federal methodology to generate a student aid index and SAI. And then as the sections are completed, check marks in the sidebar will show that they're done. As you can see here on this screenshot, student identity, personal information, and personal circumstances are all done, which is why there's a little blue check mark in a white circle. So here's some information about the dependent student parent invitation. So if the student is dependent, so the parent contributor information is required, they'll be prompted to invite their parent to contribute to the form. If the parent is present with the student, they can continue to complete the parent section without needing to access the form via an email invitation. So the workflow just continues and basically the student could pass the laptop to the parent or they could switch chairs. If the parent is not present, the student will need to correctly type the parent's email address and send the invitation, as you can see on the screenshot. So for reviewing responses, after the student sends the parent invitation, if applicable, they have the opportunity to review their answers. So as you can see here in the review section, you can click on the little caret. Here, you can see my mouse probably. You click on the caret to open up and see all of the answers, and you can jump back to any section to make any edits if needed. Of course, those of you who work directly with students, I always highly recommend you to encourage your students to review for typos and other errors. Then sign and submit. Contributors will need to check both boxes to agree, then they'll be able to sign and submit. Students will see a banner alerting them that their form is awaiting parent input. So for this one, for example, this student knows that their CASFA is not going to be complete until their CASFA is not going to be complete and they're not going to generate an SAI until they have the parent input. And so there's that alert right there. So awaiting contributor. The student dashboard will show that the CASFA status is awaiting contributor if the parent has not completed their section and submitted. The SAI will not appear until the form is complete and all contributors signed and submitted. So here is where it says awaiting contributor and SAI in the dashboard. The parent accepts the invitation. So the parent receives an email with the subject, help Sophie with their CASFA form. The parent must use the complete application link in the email to access the form. The parent cannot access the form by going to the CASFA site and creating an account. And important, if the parent is using the same device as the student must log out of their CASFA account. Otherwise, the parent will see an error message. This shouldn't happen that often because if the student is inviting the parent, then the parent shouldn't be right next to the student, but just in case, make sure that the student logs out. So the parent accepts the invitation. After the parent clicks complete application, they'll be directed to enter a verification code to access the student's form. So that's that same multi-factor authentication that everyone's familiar with. So the parent will not create an account, so there's no username and password. And then once they enter the verification code, the parent is taken directly to the parent section of the form. And there's an opportunity for the parent to enter all their information here. So if the parent has to return to complete the CASFA, so they start to complete it, but they pause, it will automatically log them out. To continue completing the form, the parent must find the original email invitation and use the complete application link to access the form again. Or their student could sign in and return to the parent invite section and send the invitation again. Parents cannot sign in using the CASFA sign in page to log in and continue to form. Again, this is a change from our prior vendor. So for parents who file their taxes separately, so if the parent selects unmarried and living together, married, or remarried, they'll be asked if they filed a joint tax return with their current spouse and what their tax filing status was. If they select any option other than married filing jointly, they will be asked to provide information about the parent spouse. So, for married filing separately, again, unlike the FAFSA, the parent section will continue with the parent spouse questions. The parent spouse will not be separately invited to contribute to the CASFA. The parent will sign and submit, then the parent spouse will sign and submit, as you can see here on the screenshots. After submitting, so once the student and parent contributors have signed and submitted, they will see a thank you message confirming submission. The student will then be able to log in and see their updated status and SAI on the dashboard. So this student's SAI is 12,497. For CASFA corrections and summary, after a CASFA status is submitted, the student will see the option to continue and correct application. So students may make changes and resubmit. They should make corrections only after talking to their financial aid office to confirm. So we don't recommend that students make corrections to areas based on their guesses. Um, let's see. I know I went pretty quickly. I was going to try to go slowly. I went pretty quickly through the financial aid, through the screenshots of the application itself, through the CASFA. But I hope that walkthrough was helpful. I want to do a little knowledge check so we can talk about this. And I think I will stay sharing my screen, but I'm going to need help because I can't see everyone. So who is prepared to list one change to the new CASFA that increases immigrant safety? You could put this information in the chat. You could raise your hand. You could come off mute. Whatever you're most comfortable with. Great. Thank you. I see, took me a minute to figure out where the chat was. Sorry, everyone. Brendan and Yanine, both put great information. So Brendan said no address. So he's totally correct. So there's no CASFA address. Yanine mentioned does not report to federal agencies. This isn't a change from our prior CASFA vendor. However, one distinction between CASFA and FAFSA is that the CASFA currently does not and never has in the past reported to federal agencies. Thank you both for participating. I appreciate you. So another, right, just like I said, doesn't share student or contributor address, and also identification number is another big change. What financial aid application should a student with an F2 visa complete? Um, and if you're ready, it'd be great if you can put your stuff in the chat, or some other options include coming off mute or whatever works. Well, maybe I'll just go with Thank you, Yanin. Yanin is right. The student with an F2 visa should complete a CASFA, correct, Liz? So that's a tricky one, and I know I tricked you on it. An F2 visa is not listed as an eligible non-citizen. So unless someone who is a visa holder, their visa is specific on the list of eligible non-citizens, then they should complete a CASFA. So yeah, that information is correct. Um, and then one more knowledge check question. So, what information do students and their contributors need to complete a CASFA? Yeah, thank you, Brendan. Exactly. So students contributors must bring prior year taxes. CASFA requires students and contributors to manually enter income information. So CASFA never has and never will connect directly to the IRS, which is, or I guess I can't predict the future, but never has in the past and isn't planning to connect to the IRS. So everyone always manually enters their tax information. Thanks again for your participation. So, some more scenarios, some more practice. And if any of you thought that it would be a better use of time to not do these scenarios and to have a conversation about CASPA, that would be fine too. But here's a scenario that sometimes helps. So, your student shares they are a refugee and are in the process of becoming a U.S. citizen. They said their citizenship ceremony will probably be in February of 2026, so that's next month. Which financial aid application should your student complete and why? You're welcome to put your information in the chat or come off mute, whatever works. Thank you so much, Guillermo. And I appreciate the probably that's a CCCS person if it says S number. So they are an eligible non-citizen, right? One important point is since they are waiting for their U.S. citizenship status, that status isn't finalized, thus not relevant to their financial aid eligibility. Immigration statuses that are in progress do not affect financial aid eligibility. And I have found that oftentimes this is where people get confused, professionals and students as well, not understanding if a status that is in progress or there's a date set if that is finalized. So please pay attention to that and don't allow yourself to get too confused by somebody saying, oh, I'm going to become a U.S. permanent resident in March. So scenario number two, student schedules hopefully an appointment to complete a CASFA. The student has always lived with and been supported in aunt's household. Aunt has not legally adopted student, but has provided majority of support this year. Student's biological parents live in Mexico, are divorced, and do not live together. And both parents provide the same amount of financial support to the student. Who is this student's contributor on the FAFSA? Oh, excuse me. Huh. I should say CASFA. I edited part of this, but not all of this. I'm so sorry, everybody. Um, Here, why don't I just fix that now? But who is the contributor? Um, Great. Thank you so much, Yanine. I see that Yanine said parent with the highest income. Um, that is really helpful. So Yanine's point is that even though the aunt is an important factor in this conversation. The aunt is not the contributor, right? It's um, the parents who are contributors. And then again, just like Anine said, it's the parent with the greater income is the contributor. Keep in mind there are lots of layers here. Like, what if the aunt had legally adopted the student through the courts, right? That would be different. What if contacting the biological parents pose a risk to the students, right? Then the answer would be different. And then how do you report foreign tax information? The answer to that is you just convert the currency. And then always remember to use and refer to your resources too. The Parent Wizard is a great tool that helps FAFSA or CASFA students answer the question, who is my contributor? And then for this one, ensure a student can answer yes to any of the personal circumstances question and double check the unusual circumstances because of this situation that the student lives with their aunt and their parents live in a different country. So I do have one more scenario. This is my last one for the CASFA eligibility expansion, right? The student was born in Colorado, is a U.S. citizen, and is from a mixed immigration status family. The parents expressed fear about completing a FAFSA due to the requirement of sharing their information with federal student aid. How do you advise the student and their family about which financial aid application they should complete? And a few points. The questions are, can the student afford college if they don't complete a FAFSA, thus forfeiting federal student aid potentially up to $7,395 per year in federal Pell Grant. Sorry for going too fast. And then, did the parents complete a FAFSA for an older sibling? And have the parents filed taxes using an I-10 before? So those are the questions to consider. And does anyone want to share maybe in the chat some specific recommendations that they have for this challenging situation? How they would advise the student? Well, I will go on to the next slide, which of course has lots of information. The student can complete a CASFA, even though they're eligible for federal student aid, if their family wants to keep their information within Colorado higher education institutions. So then the CASFA students are only applying for state and institutional aid, not federal student aid. Again, about the FAFSA for an older sibling, again, about the I-10. And I just want to encourage you all that the CASFA eligibility is not going to benefit every mixed immigration status family. It's a very small select group of students who are going to decide that's the right choice for them and their family. So we have made it to the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your patience and your interest. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then, of course, answer Alma's question. And again, I want to point out that this is a great time to ask other questions as well. Thank you, Alma, for your question. In the chat, she said, what is the amount that is offered to CASFA students? Does this depend on the Colorado college they choose? The answer is yes, absolutely. So every financial aid office is going to determine how they support students differently, right? And so some of our institutions of higher education in Colorado are able to award greater dollar amounts to students who complete a CASFA, and some are able to award smaller dollar amounts to students who complete a CASFA. One thing to point out is that often the CASFA does not, the CASFA award, excuse me, the award that a student who completes a CASFA may receive is often smaller than the maximum federal Pell Grant. So it's often smaller than $7,395. One little piece there is that the CASFA is not a fund. So a student who completes a CASFA does not receive CASFA dollars from the state of Colorado. They receive state-funded financial aid, which is not the exact same. But thank you for your question, Alma. I hope that helps. So Yomara asked, I have a student who has an I-10 and so do the parents. Should she fill out a CASFA? She has made an appointment with me to review information further. So that's great that she made an appointment because sometimes students don't do that. So the student, if she has an I-10, it sounds like she does not have a social security number. However, it is worth it to review who is an eligible non-citizen with her because there is a possibility that she has an I-10 and is also has asylum granted or something like that. So verify that she in fact isn't eligible to complete a FAFSA, and then yes, encourage her to complete a CASFA. When on her CASFA, she will not need to provide her I-10 or her parents' I-10. So that identification number will not be required for CASFA completion. Carol, I would be happy to. You can provide your email in the chat. Also, this will all be posted. So the recording of this webinar will be posted. In addition, we will have, what else do we put on the website, Jen? We put the presentations, the questions, anything
And the
else?
recording.
And the recording. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? I thought, Janine, I thought you had a question, but I think maybe you put your hand down. So obviously you're welcome to ask it or not, whatever works best. Jessica has a question in the chat, so I'll read that. So, Jessica said, with mixed status students and families, because the student is a citizen or eligible non-citizen, they cannot be eligible for the non-Title V Colorado student grant, correct? How do you suggest we approach conversations with these families, especially for schools that do not have institutional aid for non-asset students, or at least messaging that financial aid offices can provide to this demographic on our website emails? These are great questions. I think we should go over them slowly because I think that there's a lot in here. So I don't know what you mean non-Title IV. Well, I mean, of course, I know what Title IV is. Colorado Student Grant is allocated to financial aid offices of our institutions of higher education. And then from there, our institutions of higher education determine their own policies and procedures. So there may be one specific or multiple specific institutions of higher education that um, take Colorado Student Grant and separate it into Title IV eligible, non-Title IV eligible. However, that's not required, right? That's the institution. Since we have a decentralized financial aid system in Colorado, they can decide to do that. So when you say they cannot be eligible for non-Title V for CSG funds, that depends on the institution of higher education. You could be checking with them about that. When I was working on the CASFA eligibility expansion with institutions, they were reviewing to understand the changes, and I think they should have been fixing that. So they should allow non-Title for CSG to be awarded to students who are from mixed immigration status families if they need to. And then how do I suggest you approach these conversations with families? And when you say for schools that do not have institutional aid for non-Colorado asset students. So you are talking about institutions of higher education that aren't going to be awarding aid to students who aren't considered Colorado students, so they're not paying the Colorado resident tuition rate, and they're not going to be awarded state-funded financial aid. I recommend approaching the conversation by helping them understand what sort of financial aid they might be eligible for. Specifically, are they eligible for institutional scholarships, or should they be looking at external scholarships, that sort of thing? Also, if you're having conversations with families about this, I highly recommend you use President's Alliance on Higher Education and Immigration because they have great ways to talk about the pros and cons of basically completing a FAFSA versus the pros and cons of completing a CASFA. And that's the messaging I would recommend that you provide would be the messaging from President's Alliance on Higher Education and Immigration. Their messaging template is really ideal, helping students with that. Sure, no problem. Thanks for your question, Jessica. And obviously, please follow up if you have additional ones. Well, I think maybe we're done. And if so, we look forward to speaking with you later. I think, Twyla, are you going to close us out? Is that right?
Sure. Yeah.
Great.
All right.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Sophie and Jen. Okay, if we don't have any other questions, thank you so much for joining us today. Again, we will post all of this on our website under the events page on the outreach page on the CDHE website. And always feel free to reach out if you have any questions. We are here. We are a mighty team of, I guess, three for FAFSA and CASFA. So, yeah, feel free to reach out. And thank you so much for joining us. Have a good rest of your day. I think you'll have to stop recording, Jen. I don't think I have access.